The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us for today's webinar about Sony cameras, where we're going to look at dome and full-body styles. My name's Richard Bell and I'm the National CCTV Product Manager here at Alarm Corp. Joining me today is Mark Franklin from Sony. Mark's been the Product Manager at Sony and has many years' experience in the CCTV industry, with the last 16 years being with Sony itself. Just before we get started, let's run through some of the general housekeeping. You'll notice that you are muted, and you will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. Just to ensure that you can see me, can you please click on the hand icon? That's great. I can see lots of raised hands. You can lower them now. At any time, feel free to ask questions, but at the end of the webinar, we will have a session dedicated just to questions, and we'll go through those then. Just remember to click send after typing your question. We'll just cover through the some of the agenda, which we'll briefly go through in the point form, and then we'll expand a bit more, and Mark will go on the pros and cons on both. Today we're going to specifically really look at the IP range. And while Sony still do a complete range of analog cameras, and it's still very much alive, but due to time constraints, the examples we're going to refer to today are in the IP sphere. So, Mark, if I can just pass over to you just to go through the bullet point forms, and then once we go through those, then we'll expand on them a bit more in detail.
Sure, thanks, Richard. Thank you. This afternoon we'll look at basically a number of things, but we'll start off in the outline by looking at full body versus mini dome and the differences between them. And then we'll head on to, after that, we'll start to look at applications for full body, and then move through to sort of indoor vandal and indoor and indoor vandal mini dome applications. Moving on to outdoor mini dome applications, and then furthering that, outdoor IR applications using mini domes, and being integrated IR outdoor, that is. And looking at some unique specialist applications like transport mini domes, and finally the 360-degree hemispherical mini domes, 360-degree cameras. So we'll cover those this afternoon.
And just, we thought we'd throw one in a curveball at the end with the bullet style cameras. And traditionally, sometimes people forget about these particular ones, but they're maybe a little bit of a hybrid as such, or they're quite flexible, that you get the benefits of a lot of a full body, but maybe in a reduced format. And they'll also be shown with a couple of the models, and one in particular, a new release that Sony have just brought out in the last month or two.
And then finally, we'll look at the lineup, some of the Sony cameras, the full body and mini domes of the cameras that we've mentioned above.
With the full body, like Mark, one of the main advantages is that you've got a removable lens to cover various focal lengths, and that's probably the most outstanding one in that for it.
Absolutely, yeah. That does give you the flexibility in a full body. Sometimes people like to call them box cameras. I prefer to call them full body. And of course, they'll sort of the camera range that we're talking about this afternoon. In the Sony camera range, they come with a removable CS mount lens that allows you to select the lens according to the field of view that you want. The Sony IP cameras do come with a standard 2.8 to 8mm lens, but of course you can change that. Whereas with the mini domes, generally mini domes these days, or certainly the Sony range, come with the integrated motorized lenses to suit. So that's the main differences between the two.
Sometimes, where the mini dome is like the jack of all trades, where in probably 80 to 90% of applications they probably fit that unit. They're probably easy to mount. You've got a one piece. You don't have to look at heaters, blowers, wall mounts, things like that. But we'll cover some of those as well.
Certainly, very easy to mount, and with the integrated lens. certainly quite straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. Right, with the full body then cameras, again, there are various types of housings to suit the actual applications that there, and the camera itself, it may be a short, stocky full body, but you may need to have a longer housing depending on your focal length. If you've got lenses like 8 to 80 mil, they're obviously a lot longer, to cater for the standard 2.8 to 8 mil type lens.
Yeah, so again, it depends where they are, but you can have just a simple standoff, as in the picture on the far left, to full body cameras there, or as Richard said, using housings that are appropriate for the size of the lens. I mean, we'll talk later about it, but you can obviously even adopt a full zoom lens into a housing, whereas of course many domes have their own housing applicable.
Yeah. And this one here probably shows, when we're talking about different size lenses, about what you can actually put, especially with some of the large power zoom lenses on these cameras.
Absolutely, it gives you some great flexibility. With, for example, what's shown here is our half-inch SSC VB635 camera with lens control, RS485 connector, allowing you to integrate with a full housing and pan tilt arrangement for and the full lens control to give you full flexibility of lenses, many times magnification, optical magnification.
And traditionally, Mark, units like this, maybe the aesthetics is not probably the #1 priority, but when you're using these out on sites like mines and areas in the industrial side of things, the #1 thing that they want there is probably good zoom range with optical clarity, without the digital effect coming in, where the end result is that you get a pixelated image.
Yeah, they're this sort of application where you can choose the zoom range according to your application. A classic example would be on the roadways with these cameras mounted 15-20 metres up a pole in a specialised housing to give you full optical zoom, and not to take away from a PTZ camera, that's for another day, but these are for specific applications like roadways or mining, for example.
But, and mini domes, again, they're more in the commercial sort of space, and we'll show some photos of installations in the upcoming slides, where you actually can see those in action, and the various mounting options for those as well.
Yeah, certainly, and we'll talk more about this in the slides to come, but they're normally for near or wide-angle, near-field applications, entrances, that sort of thing, where you want, as I said, a very easy installation of a choice of fixed or varifocal lens. But
again, Mark, as we go and look at this next slide out here, one of the benefits of maybe like the one-size-fits-all sort of analogy, when you've got a mini dome here that's got the IR all built into it, if when you're referring to the near field, you're not looking at very long distances. Traditionally, when you've got a full bodied and you need to cover that, you've got external IR illuminators to cover that. But the Sony one's here, and I'll let you talk about some of the adaptive IR features for it.
Sure. It sort of has to be fit for purpose. So, I mean, with a mini dome that has, say, for example, a 2.8 to 8 mil integrated lens, and yes, it is HD or full HD. It's great having and these cameras will throw up to about 30 metres in IR. There's no point having 100 metre, high output IR illuminated LEDs on it if the camera is designed for a near field sort of your wide angle sort of approach. So these are all fit for purpose, and what they do is that because they have the integrated IR illumination, it's quite unique in that most of us have seen the effects of a standard mini dome or IR, where when the IR illuminators turn on, as the subject approaches the camera, it's a complete whiteout, as you can see on the left-hand side of the image there on the screen. What we do is quite unique with advanced IR, something similar or akin to sort of a auto iris feedback, if you like, for a lens. As the subject approaches the camera, the servo inside the camera starts to wind back the intensity of the LED so that it reduces the exposure and so that you can see, obviously, in greater detail the subject. So that on the far right you can clearly see that. And that's a dynamic thing, and that's the advantage of having an integrated IR illuminator in the mini dome.
Okay. And also these applications, while they're in the outdoor domes as such, there's nothing stopping you from using this camera in an indoor situation either, if a customer wants to be able to have the ability to have the benefits of IR in an evening where they don't want to have all their office lights and that left on.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay. We move forward to some of the full-bodied applications, and there's a couple of photos in that there, and the difference, with the lenses and that we're covering here is obviously completely different for the mini dome application.
Yeah, I guess we're looking at an application for full body, either outdoor or indoor. Indoor full body is where you. Here's an example where you want sort of a lower angle of field, a low angle of view, for say, for example, an entry ID, something that comes to mind, banks, that sort of thing, where different fields of views are required. Or with a mini dome, with a wide angle varifocal, of course you're going to be looking more of a top-down view, and that's kind of fixed. With a with a full body, of course, you can adapt the lens appropriate to the distance and what you're trying to capture. But in the example above, the top example is certainly mounted near the entrance, something like a bank. The example on the bottom of the page is classic a camera on a pole. Again, yes, you could have a mini dome for covering, say, a short distance, or in this case, the full body on a pole in a housing with, for example, a zoom lens. So they're the two differences.
Mark, would some of the other things that people sometimes miss when considering when we look at, say, the ones on the pole there, that even if the focal lengths of the lens may be still in the same range as a mini dome, but the full body has the ability, because you've got it in a housing with sunshades and things like that, whereas a mini dome you haven't got that sort of protection, and with the glare in that. Is that a valid point?
Some you can get sunshades for mini domes, but again, it depends on what you're trying to do. With a camera, most of the mini domes, certainly all the Sony mini domes, have a 2.8 to 8 sort of wide angle lens for sort of a near entrances, that sort of idea, entrances to buildings, whereas what we're showing here with a full body is covering a large car park arrangement, maybe at a shopping centre or at wherever, a sporting field, and you can then select a lens appropriate to the sorts of areas you want to cover. And yeah.
Okay. Actually, while on that, we did touch on this last month when we looked at lens selection and that, but we'll just go over a couple of things here. When you said about like the distances, when we're looking at a full-bodied distance versus a traditional like mini dome sort of distance.
Well, yeah, so it just needs to be kept in mind. And when you're designing a security system, what are you trying to do? In this case, we're using a full-body example. The first one on the previous slide was of a couple of full bodies that were set on a ceiling pointed towards a doorway, which you didn't see in the image, but on a very low horizontal view, so to pick up people's faces, that sort of idea. So a reasonable distance from the subject matter, perhaps, with a zoom lens, say a 50mm, something like a 50 or 80mm zoom, which, very focal. And that gives you the flexibility of taking a lens off and putting an 80mm on to give you that, whereas with a mini dome you've got a 2.8 to 8. So in this case it's a much, showing much greater, I guess, shallower horizontal field of view.
Sure. Okay. If we look at some of our indoor applications, and again, Sony also have a Vandal for indoor applications as well. Vandal is not just sort of intended for an outdoor side of things where people can get access, for them, and the heights and the various mounting options what you've got.
Richard, this is a really good example actually of a situation where it would be very difficult to put a full body or box camera in the place. The image you see on the bottom is an entrance, it's an office area. What you may not be able to see there is there's a massive step in the ceiling. So that ceiling is 2.4 meters high. If you were to put a box camera on a standoff, you could actually very easily, someone could reach up and move the camera around and obviously move its position. Whereas in this case, a perfect example of where a mini dome would work very well. To add to that, all of our mini domes have the ability to recess mount, so you can reduce the footprint even further. In this case, a very low ceiling height is resolved by having a recess mount kit attached to the mini dome, so all you see is the bubble coming out of the ceiling.
It's a good point, and to see the next slide that we're coming up now, if you can compare what you actually see with the recess kit on that top left photo compared to there's the actual full housing
Yes.
of it if it's in a surface mount situation.
And yeah, here's a scenario where using an indoor vandal resistant in a hallway, it's at a university or a school, something like that, where you've got looks like a 2.7 high, 3 metre high ceiling, something like that, and looking at a corridor, that sort of idea, or even at 2.4. But yeah, that's an example of a situation where you install without a...
Yeah, it's typically out of reach. You're going to need a 6-foot pair of steps to actually get to those. And in that photo showing the hallway there, you really can't flush mount something like that because it's probably got a concrete slab in that for it. So having a surface mount dome camera style there is quite acceptable.
Yeah, and this particular one is an IK10 vandal resistant. That's probably for another day. We could talk about it, but all the Sony cameras, when we say they're vandal resistant, have a measurement against an impact resistance. They're all measured the IK. These are all IK10 compliant, which is the highest level of impact resistance. So these have a polycarbonate. All of our all our vandal domes have a polycarbonate covering. All the indoor domes have a non-vandal or just a standard covering, but yeah, this particular one here, vandal, is a polycarbonate with a die-cast base.
And okay, while that might be in an educational side of things, when we're showing it here in a commercial environment where aesthetics is a very important part for it, especially when you can actually see the amount of cameras that you've got at that entrance.
Absolutely. So a classic example of here with Myer, where there's one mini dome per entrance to one of their shops, and they've chosen not to use the recess kits, so people can actually see the cameras, but they could of course use a recess kit there. Either or, doesn't matter. But again, that's using a near field, obviously trying to capture people as they're walking in.
Okay. And while they showing things here, when we talk about being discreet as such, they're still in a situation where they are able to be seen by customers, in there.
We also do a range of what we call microdomes. They're becoming quite popular now, generally with a fixed lens. In this case, either a 2 or 3 millimetre, I think this is a 3 millimetre lens, and it's a nice wide angle, in this case 113 degree, and very low profile. So if you've got a low ceiling or something where, but you want a nice wide shot, in this case it's a shop, just monitoring the merchandise. As you can see, it very small footprint. In fact, not very well noticed given the size. So very good for discrete installations.
Right. And before, when we spoke about the full body and we show the distances when we're talking around 20 metres or plus, it's a bit different when we're looking at the dome side of things and out here and that for them.
So this is just an example. It's really not meaning to get too scientific, so that obviously this is variable, but all I'm trying to show here compared to what we were looking at before with a full body, yeah, look, the full bodies come with a 2.8 to 8 mil lens as well, but they can be removed. In this case, it's a 2.8 to 8 mil, that's it, motorized zoom lens, and in this case I'm just talking about a top-down, near field sort of entrance type shot. Yeah.
Again, when we're looking at like the outside situations, while it is on the right-hand side, you can see that's a surface mount camera. You can see the corresponding view on the left with the an in-ceiling side of things, for reduced footprint.
Yeah, an example here of actually an outdoor IP66 rated IK10 Vandal dome with IR. Integrated IR. You can see that it's mounted on the eaves along a shopping centre, looking back towards the window. That could be either recess mounted, or it doesn't have to be. In that shop there, it's not, but there's a recess mount kit there on your left, specifically for that camera as well.
Okay. We spoke about some of the IR applications with the what Sony's benefits in that were. But this probably just takes a little bit further in some of the things in that for it.
Yes, this is an example, an outdoor example there, is again, typical mini dome, typical mini dome, IR mini dome, without any smarts. So as soon as the infrared lighting is turned on, it's just going to swamp the near the object that's coming towards the camera. In this case, I'm not really sure what that thing is above that person's head. Strange, but it could be anything. It's just obviously it's reflection, too much light, too much IR. Then, of course, not very usable from a security point of view, compared to one of our integrated IR domes, where, as I said before, as the image gets closer, the IR illuminators start to throttle back in your intensity. And so you don't get any of those artifacts, you don't get any reflections, you get a nice clear image of a person walking up towards you.
And as we'll see in this upcoming slide, Mark, when you said about as they get closer to you with the intensity throttling back, we can see the differences, the facial recognition.
Yes, it's very clear there. And again, all the IR, the outdoor mini domes come with integrated IR for that reason.
Okay. Okay, well, we've spent a few things in that about the IR, the mini domes and IR, and the illuminators. We look at some of the fairly new models in the Sony range with the transport mini domes. And even though they use the word transport and that in there, it doesn't mean they have to be just put purely on a movable device. We've had some customers use these in a commercial environment mainly because of their small footprint, and they're a full HD camera.
Sure. Yeah, this is an example of these 3 cameras in this particular range. They're the Sony X series. There's this outdoor. This is XM632, 636, or 637. 636 and 637 are specifically designed. They're transport certified, and they actually come with an M12. It's an industrial connector on the back rather than a standard RJ45, specifically designed to withstand the intensity or the intense vibration of a train or a bus. Here's an example on the left of a bus. So you've got a different angle. There's a fixed 83 degree, or in a train, slightly wider carriage, obviously wanting a wider field of view, 113 degrees. So they're 2 different cameras. There's a third camera which is the same footprint, looks identical, which is IP66 IK8, but could be used. It's got a RJ45 connector on it, so it can be used anywhere, outdoors, indoors, whatever you like.
Okay. But, yeah, moving on. This particular camera, the HM662, this is a completely new to the Sony range. Haven't had one before, and it's got some very nice features.
Well, I thought I'd include this. We're looking at mini domes versus full body cameras, and there's a lot of interest these days in polar or 360 degree cameras. Where this differs, this is like a situational awareness camera designed to give you an overview of a 360 degree overview. What's different about this camera is that it comes with an Immervision patented lens. Immervision designed a lens, not the average polar pattern that we've probably all seen, and the problem with the polar pattern lens is that to de-warp that, or to de-stretch it, or stretch it I should say, in order to achieve an image, say for example, if you're looking at the top half of the screen, you'll see there's a polar. In our case we call it a hemispherical, because it's not a polar, it's more of an egg shape. I'll explain why in a minute. And then you have 3 decoded patterns. so that it gives you a similar effects to a traditional PTZ camera. Now we've probably all seen the effects of when we start to decode a polar circular into its components. There's a lot of edge distortion where right at the edges are out of focus, distorted, and the dynamic range is actually very poor, generally speaking, from a traditional 360 camera. But with the Sony 360-degree panamorphic cameras with the Immervision lens, because I guess the fundamental pattern is an egg shape or a hemispherical shape, it doesn't take as much, or there isn't as much distortion when we start to de-warp that. And so you get a much sharper image across the board, and combined with the Sony imager, you get 90 dB worth of dynamic range. So a high dynamic range camera coupled with this patented lens gives you quite a unique 360-degree mini dome. So it's like the situational awareness camera. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite a good feature. And then it's like the overview, and then when you actually want to probably look, in a more closer picture, this is backed up with a second line, whether there be internal mini domes or closer to the actual subject.
Back up this with a traditional PTZ camera, an optical PTZ camera, if you wanted to follow someone through a scene. You can do the same with this. This is a 5 megapixel camera, but you could use them in conjunction with an optical PTZ. But in any case, this is a mini dome, and for an overview application.
But I know when I was trialing it recently, I was quite impressed with how far it could be. Like even when you mount it on a wall, it was nearly extending to like 180 degrees. In that for
yeah. In fact, on the bottom there you can see where it says panoramic 1P. It's a 180 degree view, two 180 degree views stitched together, and we're looking at distances of what 30 meters. To give you an overview.
Yeah, quite impressive. Now, with the beginning, we did throw in the curly one saying about bullet cameras. Sony have just released a new bullet eye outdoor unit, the 632 and the 602. They're being 720p and a 1080 camera. So, Mark, what can you tell us about these?
Well, it gives you what this does is it gives you some of the advantages of a full-body camera and some of the mounting advantages of a mini dome. And so you've got flexible angles, similar to that you'd be able to get out of a full body, for example. So you've got the sorts of adjustment in the horizontal direction and in the vertical, for et cetera, et cetera. What this camera has in it is it's an outdoor IP66 rated. And it has a sun shield, and that sun shield that you can see there on top of the camera is adjustable. Depending on where the camera is mounted. It also has an 2.8 to 8 mil varifocal length, or let's say zoom. It's a varifocal motorized zoom lens that you can adjust the field of view on. And of course, it also has IR, similar to with the advanced IR that we were talking about before, the mini domes.
It looks like a good mix of both technologies there, especially when you look at the bottom photos. It's like got them mounted on an angle. So in terms of aesthetics and also probably vulnerabilities, that you actually haven't got it sticking out as much in that as well.
Sure. No, and before I forget, we can actually mount these, connect them to what they call a back box. So if you don't want to drill holes through brick walls and concrete walls, you can mount a box behind the top flange, for example, and out of that would come your the conduit, for example. So you can run a conduit down the wall, and there are pole adapters, so you can actually strap that to a pole as well.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. But, now if we start to do some of the summary for the lines of the cameras.
I'd like to summarise what we can do in terms of resolution and the type of cameras. I'd start off with the full body box cameras, both 720 and 1080 resolutions. We do a couple of ranges. One V, a V series. Now think of it V as the video out, or has for value add, we have dual voltage, so it's not only PoE, but also you have your 1224 volt. It has SD card for edge recording, and has video out, and also I/O, so for contact closure, open collector, for wiring into, say, your alarm circuit, for example. All those sorts of things can trigger the camera. The E series below, what we do with that is we don't compromise on the performance of all the cameras, so it still has the same performance as the V series, but if you don't want the video out, you don't want dual voltage, you just want PoE only, without the SD cards, remove some of the physical. And again, the same resolution, so 720 or 1080p resolution. And down the bottom, I thought I'd throw in that it's little C series, quite unique, a wide angle. That's a 120-degree lens, really good for this sort of a data center style. For there's two models. There's a Wi-Fi model and a PoE model. These are 720 cameras. What's quite unique about these, they come with their own. Basically, they come with two white LEDs, not IRs, but they're actually high-intensity LEDs, and a PIR with it, which is great. So someone walks into a room, PIR triggers the LEDs, throws them on and illuminates the room, a small sort of a room. Perfect sort of one size, basically full solution.
Mark, I can vouch for that. We've got one of those in our office, and when first held in your hand, it's quite a small unit, and the performance of this camera, is very, very good. We've tested in a couple of scenarios, even looking out through a tinted window at night time, and it works very well. You can see the outside, especially when it's raining as such. So it might look small, but it doesn't compromise on its performance.
No, that's true. And then to top off, there's a fixed camera. They're not traditionally a full body camera, they are fixed, sort of as a sort of a mixture or morph between a full body camera and a mini dome, if you like, so the bullet. So as we said before, the SNC, by the way, stands for Sony Network Camera. The E stands for E Series, B stands for full body, and 602 is Gen 6. That's a 720p camera. R for remote, for IR. The SNC EB632, the difference is these cameras are 1080p cameras, and so the two bullets.
Okay. And the last range of what we've got in the dome styles and the transport.
Okay, so we have a V series range with video out, SD card for edge recording, etc. Dual voltage, V for V, both in 1080 and 720p resolution. And you'll see, well, hang on, there are more than two cameras there. Well, okay, with the VM632, the 2 on the end stands for outdoor. So you've got outdoor IR Vandal. In the middle there's a VM631 and 601. So 631 is a 1080p indoor Vandal. The VM601 is a 720p indoor Vandal. And then at the end we have the acrylic covers, the non-Vandal VM630 and 600. 600 being the 720 and the 630 being the 1080. These are all 60 frame per second cameras, by the way, including the full body. They're also the cameras are up to 130 dB of dynamic range, so it has exceptional dynamic range. Below that, we've got the E series. Again, like we did with the box camera or the full body before, we just take away the dual voltage, take away SD card recording and dual voltage and audio, and also the video out, and then that gives us an E range. The X is the compact range down below. What we haven't talked about is a camera that's just basically available now, at the end of this month, the XM631. That is a 1080p indoor camera. It's vandal resistant, and it's a microdome. It's a very small form factor, indoor version of the, moving towards the centre here, the 632, outdoor IP66 version of that. 636, 637 are these specialised transport cameras with those industrial connectors on them. And then, of course, they've got the H series, which is the 360-degree camera with the Immervision lens.
Okay, and Mark, that new, the XM631, that's, it's small in size, and that's a fixed lens. That's not a varifocal.
No, yeah, correct. It's a fixed lens.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
With it gives it a 113-degree field of view, so nice wide angle.
Okay. Okay. That's probably been a bit of a brain overload in some of the things. We've got a lot of different models and cameras and part numbers, but once you get used to the style and the naming convention, it does make a bit of sense, but especially if you haven't been used to the Sony range in the past.
I guess just one comment that be it a full body or a mini dome or even a bullet for that matter, the performance is the same. So just because you're buying a mini dome doesn't mean you're going to compromise on the performance. Still getting 130 dB of dynamic, up to 130 dB of dynamic range on your mini domes as well as the full body. And of course that includes even the X series, the micro domes as well.
Okay. Okay, we're getting near the tail end of this month's webinar, but I hope you've enjoyed some of the information. But if you'd like to know more, there's a few avenues available to you. You can go to our website and subscribe to the Alarm Corps Pulse and to receive new information automatically. Or contact one of the representatives in your relevant state, and our details are below with our email addresses and mobile numbers. I'll just leave that screen up there for a minute in case you need to jot something of that down and that forum. While that's sort of happening, we'll just let you know that we're also now present on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So there's no getting away from us. So we're around the place for any of those events that you'll see regular feeds and updates in it for it. Now, just a summary, every third Thursday of each month we've got a security-related webinar. Next week, 21st, the standard and PIR detection with Aerotech to be presented by my colleague Jeff Rushton, and that for it. And every second Wednesday of each month for the CCTV. So there's the remaining topics for the rest of this year. And we'd like to appreciate your time this afternoon. So any purchases made online through our e-commerce platform, if you use the promo code shown on your screen now during the checkout, you'll receive an additional 10% off your discounted trade prices. And it applies to nearly all our product ranges, with a few exceptions that are listed below. Now we're up to question time. And, if there's any of the questions out there, now's the time to throw them up. So we'll just wait a second. Oh, Mark, here's one. I said the cameras that we covered this afternoon were all really basically fixed cameras. What about PTZs, and do Sony have these models?
Yeah, Sony also have a range of PTZs, both in 720 and 1080p resolution. Definitely.
Okay. And there is a couple of the ranges have been like the Gen 5 range and that for it, and more recently Sony have released the W series PTZs, and they've got a couple of really good features where with wide D or UDR is in Sony speak for that particular.
Sure. In fact, part of the Gen 6 range, and we've been talking this afternoon about the fixed and mini dome cameras, including the bullets. The new W series range are part of our Gen 6 range of PTZs. A couple of big things to remember: that 60 frame per second cameras. They're also have up to 130 dB of dynamic range at 1080p, which is something quite unique. And also have the cameras, the W series PTZs have up to 30 by 30 optical zoom, so powerful optical zoom, and can go between presets at the rate of 700 degrees per second. Yeah. Okay.
Another question has appeared. Is your analog range as wide as the IP range?
We do have a wide range of analog. We are focusing more and more on our IP range now, but we do have a range of indoor and outdoor cameras in our analog range. For example, outdoor mini domes with IR, same sort of style smart IR.
The SSC CM565R.
Yes.
Similar sort of aspect size. Again, it's
Similar,
it's IP rated. It's got the adaptive IR as well.
It does have adaptive IR, yes.
And a varifocal lens in that for it.
Yes, we do a bullet, 2 bullets actually. We do a with IR as well. One 565 CB565R and CB575R. The only difference between those two, one has a 2.8 to 8 mil varifocal lens. The other 575 has a 8 to 22 mil varifocal lens.
Right. Also, like on the indoor side, like the small, the FM561 series, like it's an indoor, but it's also a wide D camera. And
Yes.
I particularly like that. We've got one of those installed in our office here in Sydney, and it does work very, very well.
Yeah, these are all high resolution with 700 TV line analog cameras with wide D. There's an indoor, there's a low profile, small form factor box or camera, and there's also the mini dome of that, which is the FM561.
But I've just been asked about do we have a complete list of the cameras on our website and the catalogue. There's some of the new ones which we haven't updated those yet, but I can see the person who's asked that question, and I'll follow that up after this session with you to give you a USB key with all the relevant data sheets as such.
All of our cameras, sorry, just to help too, all of our cameras, our analog and our IP cameras are also on the Sony website. The easier way to get there to our professional home page is to go to pro.sony.com.au/security.
Okay. Here's a question, Mark, that I can answer. I see various companies talking about their low light performance. Yeah, it seems like they're always trying to outdo each other. Can you please explain in simple terms what we should be looking for as the main points for the performance of a camera?
Well, if we're looking at low light isn't the only thing. It is important because these cameras have to run 24/7, and it's also important to remember not to just look at the spec on the paper on a specification. Particularly, I would be questioning if it's not qualified. So, for example, the camera says that it will do 0.0 whatever 0 lux in low light. If it's not qualified, then you'd have to wonder how that was referenced, how that was made, how did it actually get there. With a Sony camera, and have to look at all of our spec sheets and our A&E documents, we specifically mention the IRE, so we either measure it at 50 or 30 IRE, so the reference, the f-stop number, whether AGC was applied or not, the lens, the sort of etc., etc. So we always qualify our spec for a low light. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a requirement for a single spot monitor connected to a camera. As the market it's going towards IP, how do I achieve this in a cost-effective manner? As with analog, cameras, you could use a distribution amplifier to get 2 video feeds. I think we sort of covered part of this when we looked at the E and the difference between the E and the V series.
That's a good question because precisely any of the V series, V for Victor, series cameras, I like to think of video out, have video out, composite video out for that reason, so that you can pop that into a local spot monitor, and you can have that at the same time, obviously, as having your IP stream go over your Cat6.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, sorry, yes, the E series, E for expert series, they don't have a full-time video out. However, there is a monitor out, usually an RCA or a mini jack, depending on whether it's full body or mini dome, which you can pop your little 7-inch, 9-inch LCD monitor into and adjust the lens. That's what it's for.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you everybody for their time this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. I'd also like to thank Mark Franklin from Sony, who's with us,
Thanks, Richard.
and we look forward to seeing you at the next presentation.